Good evening. Welcome to the Livonia Public Schools Board of Education regular meeting of October 16th, 2017. Mr. Centers, would you please take the roll for us?
Mrs. Bonifield.
Present.
Mrs. Bradford.
Here.
Mrs. Frank.
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Centers is here. President Burden.
Here. We have a quorum. Mrs. Bradford, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance today?
Yes, I can. I'm right here. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to those of you who are here and to those who are watching from home. If you would like to follow along with an agenda this evening, if you're present in the room, they're located on the table just outside the doorway to your right. If you're watching from home and you'd like to follow along with an agenda, they can be found on our website. That is at www.livoniapublicschools.org. If you hover over the board tab, you can drop down to agendas and follow along with us this evening. One of the primary goals that Livonia Public Schools is working on, we select a few each year to put a special focus on. This year includes the goal of respect. And in part, I will read to you that goal. Every LPS classroom and school environment will exhibit and promote mutually respectful and supportive interactions. And it goes on with a little bit more detail. I want you folks to know that you have the word of this Board of Education that we take that as our first primary focus on all of our interactions with one another. We welcome you to participate in our meeting this evening at the appropriate times, and we ask that you also behave in that same respectful way. We find that the best teaching tool for our children if we model it ourselves. You have the word of this Board of Education that we will do so for you. This evening's meeting is a voting meeting, or what's called a regular meeting. By that, we mean that the items that are coming before the board this evening have been looked at, typically at least at two other meetings, at a study session for a first glance, at a committee of the whole meeting for a very deep dive and a lot of detailed discussion. After they've been through both of those types of meetings, if the board members feel that they are ready for a vote, they will come to a voting meeting this evening. If you're looking for a lot of discussion and a lot of detail on items before they're voted upon, you may not find the level of discussion that you would expect tonight. Please understand that that is because a lot of that very deep discussion happens at our committee of the whole meetings. Those are public meetings. You are welcome to attend. If you are not able to attend but you're interested in following along, you can follow along live on our television feed while we're having our meeting. Or if you'd like to look back on one in the past, you can go on our website and pull up meetings from quite a few years ago, I believe. They're still on our website. But if you're looking for very detailed information, that is where I would suggest that you take a look. Again, if you're looking for more detailed information tonight, that is the reason you'll find some discussion, but not the level of deep discussion that we've had, because we had a lot of it last week. We will be having audience communications later on in our meeting. We're going to get to a few things in communications first. I also want to let you know that we will be having a brief break after item 3B, about a 5-minute break. We will be hearing from our Stevenson High School Global Ed Department, and then our district update from the superintendent. After that item, we'll be having a brief break so that those of us who are present this evening can congratulate our Stevenson Global Education participants. That break will be just about 5 minutes or so, and then we will continue with our meeting. At this time, we are on item 3 of our meeting, communications. And item 3A is LPS Points of Pride, Stevenson High School Global Education Program. Mrs. Jenkins.
Good evening. Good evening, President Burton, members of the board, Superintendent Oquist. This evening, we are excited to bring to you our first installment of our Points of Pride for this school year. As you recall, we began the Points of Pride program as a way to highlight the many awesome things that are happening in our schools. We started that about approximately in the spring, I think, of last school year. It's our way of communicating these programs and projects to you, the Board of Education, as well as to members of our community. We have a great lineup for the upcoming board meetings, and we hope you enjoy the first presentation on global education at Stevenson High School. At this time, I'd like to welcome global education teacher Judy Brzeski. Come on up, Judy, who will present an overview of the program. She has brought along two Globies, as they're known, who will talk about the impact this program has had on their lives. They are Michael Dieter, who is a junior, correct, at Stevenson, and Rachel Zuckerman. We remember Rachel. She's a class of 2013 Global Ed alum. So with that, I will turn it over to Mrs. Brzeski.
Thank you, Stacy. And I'd like to thank the board for inviting us to be here this evening. It's an honor for us to be able to talk about something that's near and dear to our hearts. And for me personally, this is my 24th year in Livonia Public Schools, so 24 years of global ed here, and approximately 12 years in the school that I taught at before. So I'm passionate about this particular area, and I hope that we'll be able to communicate to you just how special we think global ed here is at Stevenson. This evening, I just want to give you a little bit of background before I present this PowerPoint presentation to you, and that's just to give you a little bit of the history of the program. We are celebrating our 40th year here in Livonia Public Schools. In 1977, global education was instituted at Stevenson High School. Dr. Jonathan Swift, who unfortunately passed away in April of this year, was our founding father, and he established this program after studying for a year through funds that were appropriated by Congress. At that time, global education was a relatively new idea in education, and having a program, a curriculum that was multidisciplinary and connected students to other areas of the world was not exactly on the agenda for a lot of places. So we were one of 4 original global education schools in the United States. We are the only one of the original 4 that is still in operation. So we're very proud of the fact that our history has been continuous, and that we can offer this tonight to you to let you know that the program itself has changed over the years, and we've added more rigor to it than we started with. They started only with a freshman and sophomore class. We have approximately 275 students in the program over all 4 grade levels at this time. I also gave you a copy of some material that I thought you might find interesting about the program. We generally share this material with our parents on incoming 9th grade parent night, but also for anyone who inquires about the program, so that there's information there that includes the history of it, but also the curriculum, as well as some commentary from some of our alumni who are always welcome to come back. We encourage them to remain a part of our community, even though they've graduated and moved on to many other things. So this evening, I brought a short presentation to give you an idea of what our goal is in global education, and that is to prepare 21st century citizens for a 21st century world. And we know today that the world is very different, and it is definitely one in which we are all interdependent. We find this in almost every field in which we have students going into. And one of those things that we like to talk about with our students is, the ripple effect that interdependence has in our world today. So, for example, the tsunami in Japan may impact Toyota very quickly, but that impact also is going to improve or just make very difficult global production in other places around the world, in this case, Kentucky and our suppliers right here in Michigan. And that would lead to layoffs in some of these local communities, followed by a loss of tax base if people move out of the area. And that also goes for schools and roads and services, and you can go on and on and on with this ability to connect events that happen a world away from us and still impact us. Earlier this year, we talked about the hurricanes that hit the United States, as well as the islands in the Caribbean, and the ripple effect of what that was going to do. And our students recognize the idea that maybe gas prices will go up. Maybe we will have a more difficult time getting materials from some of these places. And so this is part of this idea of being interdependent. Being interdependent is also a positive in that we can share and encourage one another, not just from the standpoint of political allies, but definitely for economic allies. Many jobs are tied to international trade. This is a small chart that gives a breakdown of some of the larger states in our country that are affected by global and international trade. And you can see most of these are over 1 million jobs that are connected directly to this. Michigan is there, but it's misrepresented in this chart as Minnesota. We never want to confuse those two. And we definitely, because of the auto industry primarily, but also technology companies and such here in Michigan, are very much a part of this international trade. So right here at home, we have many examples that we can use. But again, it's not just about economics. We look at all different kinds of materials and topics in global education, social issues, as well as political issues, and we investigate problems of environmental questions and also of cultural issues in the world today. One topic we've been discussing this last month has been the humanitarian crisis that's going on in the Rohingya, who are trying to leave Myanmar in order to get out of the country that's persecuting them. And as they flee, they're being killed, men, women, and children. So our students, are being made aware of many of the things that are happening. It's also about people and citizenship. We recognize that citizens in the 21st century need to be active in their communities. They need to be able to stand up and be heard. They need to run for public office. They need to do all those things that bring them into what we would consider to be a global citizen. So this element of citizenship is also very big in our program, and we encourage the students to get out in the community. They do community service. Senior year, it's part of their requirements for graduation in their senior research project. But throughout the year, several years ago, for example, we had the University of Michigan come to Stevenson for several weeks in a row, and we helped them put together first aid kits for a program that they had in Africa. So the students got a chance to be a part of that too. We ask our students to do a number of things, but these are some of the primary things that they're going to be doing in this program for all 4 years. Investigating their world, and that means outside of Livonia. We're fond of saying to them that they have grown up and are very lucky to live in Sparkle Valley, but that there are other places around the world that they need to know about as well. Secondly, to recognize perspectives, different ideas and such that people have around the world, and to communicate those ideas, to be able to talk about issues and not just think about them. And then, of course, to translate that conversation and thinking into action. So we encourage, again, our students to become active in all things that they're involved in. Global Ed students know how to do a number of things. They know how to think critically, and we emphasize that when we teach all of our lessons. They learn to problem solve. And these are, by the way, characteristics that industry and business and many other places feel are required of workers, especially now. They learn to collaborate with peers. Here at Stevenson, our teachers collaborate on a regular basis, but that's a skill that all students need to be able to do. We do that in a number of ways. They work in groups oftentimes, but they also go across grade level with some of the activities that we have with them. They learn leadership skills. We have a Global Ed Council. Students are elected from all 4 grade levels, and we also encourage them to participate in student government at Stevenson and all other kinds of organizations where they can take a leadership role. And many of them do tutoring, some of them at Emerson for their homework club, and we ask them to stand up and be counted as leaders in their community. And then to adapt to change. Change is a part of life, and we always think that it's older people who have difficulty adapting to change more than younger people, but we found also that it's an issue for some young people too. So having that ability to adapt is really important. This comes from an article, Rigor Redefined, by Tony Wagner. Tony Wagner is a Harvard educator, and he's written several books about what he wants to see in the United States regarding education as more rigorous education. And so he has basically laid out some ideas, and I included some of that in the material that you have. So how we approach something is as important as what we are teaching. So the curriculum in global education is taught from social studies and language arts, but we also deal with many of the other subjects that students are involved in. So they're doing math in global ed, they're doing science in global ed, many of the other things that they see connected to both a language arts and a social studies curriculum. We teach as a team. Usually there are 2 teachers, sometimes, depending on if we're doing a cross grade level, we're all involved in it. So, and it's sequential. So what we do in freshman year, and they build on following year and sophomore year and on through junior and senior year. So the curriculum is also one in which we've invited many people from the community to be a part of. We take the students out into the community. It's not just classroom. There is an opportunity for them to travel, even though it's not a sponsored thing by the district. Our teacher, Ms. Amy Van Horn, is our travel social coordinator, and she plans the trips and makes it possible for students to see outside of the classroom things that they've learned in the real world. So this past summer they spent 11 days, I believe, in China and had a really unique experience in terms of a new culture, a new language, and many things about comfort that they had come to expect in their own they had to get used to. It also includes the ability for students to become technologically literate and skilled in those areas. We develop interdisciplinary connections with other subject matters, as I mentioned. Fluency in another language is encouraged now that foreign language is a requirement, but we also ask them to pursue that after high school if it was something that they had just begun in high school. And creating and innovating, this is the opportunity for them to do different kinds of presentations, different activities. We encourage them, for example, in their cultural events, one of the formats is a creative display. So not only are they speaking with a speech, writing with a written format, but we give them the opportunity to demonstrate some creativity and be a little more, maybe surprise us, with what they have. And finally, we encourage them to be active, again, in participating in society and understanding global issues. And we do that in our classrooms on a daily basis, whether it's part of the curriculum that we're teaching, whether we deal with it as daily current events, which they're all thrilled to do every day. And many of the things that they learn, they transfer from what we do in current events to the subject matter that we're teaching. I like to use current events as a springboard for teaching history, because many of the things that happen in the news today, if they don't know the background to it, they don't really understand what's happening. So that's another thing for us to make them aware of what's happening in the world. So in summary, global education is trying to prepare students for moving on to post-secondary education. The curriculum that we have was evaluated by both the University of Michigan and Michigan State University, and we got a very nice letter from U of M attesting to the fact that a student that goes through this program in 4 years is advantaged when they get to four-year college or a two-year college or wherever they're going after, military service, whatever it might be. The experiences that they have in this program are so unique and so different that they come with many skills, but also an outlook that is much more open and positive. So we're preparing them for all those things educationally and in many fields. Sometimes people say, well, global ed is language arts and social studies, so they're all probably working for the UN. But that's not true. We have students that are in engineering. We have students that go into all kinds of medical fields. We have many of the sciences involved. Our students are all over the board when it comes to their interests and what they pursue after they've been with us. Many of you, your children went through this program, so I probably could talk about each one of them about where they are right now, but also the idea that they come back to us and they bring and offer many of the things that they've learned to us for the students that are still in the program. And the last thing we like to emphasize with our students is this idea that citizenship is a really important responsibility in a democracy. If we don't have participation, we don't have accountability among our citizens, we're in deep trouble in a democracy. And so we promote the idea of being active citizens in their community Our slogan, "Think globally and act locally," is done in numerous ways throughout their 4 years in high school, but many of them are pursuing things afterwards as well. So this evening I thought, rather than just listening to me, that I would ask a student who's current and one who's a graduate to come and just tell you a little bit about their own experience in global ed. So I think maybe we'll start with the men first. The evening. So Michael Dieter is a junior in our program, and last year Michael was in the group that I watched for the Simon simulation. Simon stands for Stevenson Intramural Model UN. All the students in Global Ed are involved in that over a 3-day period. They're assigned a country. They have to research topics about that country. The seniors write the crisis scenarios that they will then do, and the seniors run the meeting. So they know parliamentary procedure. You know, they have a group of approximately 15 or 16 students in each group. And then the students are asked to represent that country's position in whatever crisis situation comes up. So Michael was in my group last year, and I was bowled over by the quality of his speaking, of his ability to work with other students, even on issues where they disagreed. He was always diplomatic, and I had him freshman year, so seeing him last year as a sophomore was really a treat to see how he'd matured, and I expect that he's even more so. So, Michael, you want to come up and...
Hi everyone, I'm Michael Dieter, a member of Global Education and proud Globie. I love Global Ed, I really, really love it. For the past years of high school, I can confidently say that I've been genuinely excited to go to my Global Ed classes nearly every day. And that's because of the unique learning structure and experience. Literature and world history, grammar and economics, poetry and cultural sciences. These are relatively separate subjects with whose relation is limited. And this is probably why they are taught as such to the majority of high school students. However, in Global Ed, these subjects all exist in tandem and in cohesion and is the best way to be taught. We not only learn about the history of the Cold War, for example, but we also dive deep into the insatiable paranoia that gripped the United States, demonstrated through American literature. We also examined how World War I affected the American psyche through poetic testaments of horrifying explicitness alongside a study of trench warfare. Furthermore, we studied military strategies of the Allied forces in World War II as we examined The Lord of the Flies for historical allegory. This interconnectedness of curriculum, this marriage of the historical and the abstract, is worked into every lesson learned in Global Ed, and to me that's why it's truly unique and incredible. An outstandingly structured curriculum is only half the magic that goes into global education, however. The other half is the masterful teachers. Every single teacher cares so much about what they are doing. They put in the extra effort to hammer home not only the facts of our world, but also how we, as young adults, can work to maybe make that world just a little bit better. They aren't interested in throwing facts and statistics of what happened into our faces and hope that they stick. They are also interested in teaching us how to better ourselves and maybe make our world a little bit better. The work of excellent teachers inspires the work of excellent students, and this exists in excess in the Globie staff. Such quality of teachers is rare, but in Global Ed they are a wonderful consistency. Another key aspect of our global education is a complete understanding of the individual cogs that work together to move our world forward. From day one, as we freshmen, we have been taught that in order to understand that the world that exists in our vicinity, we needed to have a meaningful and deep understanding of the world that exists abroad. To achieve this, Globies pay close attention to international affairs and events that shape our world in varying ways. In addition to a fierce emphasis on international education, independence in thought is a cornerstone of Global Ed. Never has an idea been forced on us without due explanation and opposition. Oppositely, no Globie is allowed to possess an idea without the knowledge, the will, and the ability to completely and articulately defend it. This constant demand for evidence and explanation makes us Globies into critical thinkers, effective leaders, and adaptable individuals who can charge into the changing global landscape of our international community and who won't settle for mediocrity or stagnation. So where does this leave me? What have I gained? How has global ed changed me as a person? For me, it is incredibly easy to answer these questions because of my international understanding I possess. I know exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life. I will pursue a degree in international relations and public policy at the James Madison College at MSU, and I plan on working inside our government or along with our government to shape positive change throughout our world. Global ed has shaped my future from a random pipe dream into a greater future, a bigger picture, a global education for local application. That's why I look forward to going to my Globee classes every single day, and that's why I truly and deeply love global education. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. And I'd like to introduce our second speaker. Rachel Zuckerman graduated in 2013. She went on to attend the University of Iowa, and she was student council for us in Global Ed, the president, and then she went on to run all of Iowa as their student government president. And I joke with her all the time about voting for her for president of the United States, but I'm only half joking. I think she is a lady with destiny and the ability to do whatever she wants to do. And so I'd like to introduce Rachel Zuckerman from the class of 2013.
I don't know how I follow that up. I think that speaks for itself when we talk about the types of students that the Global Ed program is building. And before I actually dive into what I want to say, Miss B emailed me about this. Can you come on Monday night? And I was like, oh, I already have the school board meeting in my calendar. I'd planned to be there anyway, so of course I'll be there. So truly, they are building global citizens. I plan to be at a school board meeting. I think that says a lot. But anyways, so yeah, I graduated from the University of Iowa in May, and I want to walk through 3 examples because if I talked about how global ed benefited me indefinitely, we would be here for a very long time. So the first core example is the freshman transition. So leaving high school, starting college, generally a time of deep anxiety for a lot of students, and statistically speaking is a time where we see a major dip in GPAs and academic struggles that persist with students throughout their collegiate career and can ultimately impact which graduate programs they get into and all of that. But because of the preparation that I had from the Global Ed program, I had the research skills, the reading, the writing, the speaking, the critical thinking skills that generally aren't introduced until you're in a college course. So the things that Ms. B listed, being able to look at an issue from multiple perspectives, that's what your collegiate professor wants you to be able to do. So I was able to transition, get 4.0s throughout my entire freshman year, and felt more than prepared at a time when students are usually struggling. Then last year, it was my senior year, I completed an honors senior thesis, which ultimately was a 50-some page document on parental leave policies at Big Ten institutions. But I was able to produce something like that and had been building up toward that since we started research development in high school. Freshman year, when you're already starting to learn how to construct solid arguments, how to read and margin note deep texts that, again, generally wouldn't be introduced to you until you're in college. And then things like going to Mayman or Model UN and writing position papers, and again, like Ms. B mentioned, taking on different perspectives, up to our senior research project where you're not only doing research in the community, but you put together a comprehensive research analysis paper and then you give a speech on that. So all of that preparing me to complete a senior thesis that's now being used by our university leaders to construct new policy. And then lastly, like Ms. B mentioned, I was involved in Global Ed Council. So in high school, I just had a world of leadership opportunities opened up to me that aren't available for the general student body, and found my place in Global Ed Council, which allowed me to be prepared and to be a competitive applicant for student government my freshman year in college. And then senior year, again, ran and was student body president where I represented 24,000 students. So those are kind of just a few things. I'm just starting, or on the surface really, not even getting into how it teaches you to think critically, introduced me to some of my very best friends in high school, opened up a world of appreciating other cultures and a desire to travel. So all of those things that will continue to stick with me, not just through college, but I'm sure for the rest of my life. So thanks again to these incredible teachers who really do make it all possible, and I appreciate your time tonight.
So before I conclude, I'd like to publicly thank Ms. Van Horn. Amy Van Horn is teacher of the freshman English classes this year, but she also took on the responsibility of a U.S. history class, which she hasn't taught U.S. history in quite a few years, but she was ready for the challenge, as she always is. And she, 2 years ago, was the Livonia Secondary Teacher of the Year. And part of that application process, I talked to her recommendation letter about the program she was a part of, which was Teachers for a Global Classroom. And she took this course that she had to have for a couple of weeks first, and then they sent her for 2 weeks to Morocco. And she came back all fired up, and she said, I know what I need to do. And I said, that's great. What do you need to do? She says, I need to put together a PowerPoint presentation that you can take wherever you want. So this was Amy's contribution to what we were doing tonight, and I really wanted her here to be able to explain it herself in some degree, and she, unfortunately, her husband had surgery today, and so she's not able to be here tonight. But I want to thank her publicly for all the effort that she put into putting this together for us tonight. And I want to again thank the board for inviting us, and you're welcome to come and observe anytime you want. Just give me a phone call and we'll set it up. You're welcome to come and see the classes and some of the activities that we do. You'd enjoy the Simon experience tremendously. If you want to come all the way to Kalamazoo, you'd enjoy the Maimon experience too. But just to be here in the local community to see that, I think convince you further that the kids are really learning a great deal, and they're learning to enjoy education, not just to go through the motions. So thank you again for having us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there questions or comments from the superintendent or members of the board?
I actually had some comments, but the two of you articulated it so much better than I ever could. But it's an outstanding program, and I think you alleviated any doubts with your presentation tonight. So thank you so much.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for coming and representing your program so well tonight. The Global Ed program is such a strong point of pride in this district, and you are wonderful living examples of why that's so. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
One of the things that struck me about the presentation was the use of the term post-secondary education, and that global education is the Global Ed program is not only for those who are strictly bound for college, but understanding and respecting the fact that not every student, his success path is guided toward a four-year institution, and that's taken into deep consideration and understanding, and I appreciate that very much.
Other board members, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. As I spoke with Ms. Brzeski beforehand, my daughter is a graduate, she's a Globie. And everything Ms. Zuckerman said is spot on. The experience prepared her so well for the next level. The transition, not just educationally, but socially, she was very well prepared to go to the next level. And make no mistake about it, it's a tough program. But as Melissa indicated, it was well worth it. All the hard work, the education that she got, the travel abroad was just outstanding. And it helped her transition not only into the first year, but beyond that. She took the tools that you gave her into the next levels. And I think Ms. Zuckerman is, a perfect example of that, to get to where you're at. She's now my daughter's seeking now to go into a master's program in conducting. musical. So it's sort of not into the typical global, but the tools that she learned helped her to get to where she's at. I don't think she'd have been able to. She was sort of shy when she went into it, but I think as she grew into the Global Ed program, it's given her the tools to now become a teacher. She teaches music, and I've seen the way she interacts with her students, and I'm not sure she would have had that without the global education. So thank you for everything you've done.
Any other superintendent? Yep. Mrs. Oquist?
Certainly, we were thrilled to have the Global Education Program highlighted tonight as a point of pride for Livonia Public Schools. We wanted to be able to not only celebrate the amazing work of our students, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Rachel, as an alumnus of our institution, to be able to come and share your personal experience with us, but also to give a picture. And Mrs. Brzeski did just that. We wanted to be able to share with the greater community some of the very special opportunities our children have in Livonia Public Schools. This is certainly one of them. And I know when we had the opportunity to have a visit a few years back from the Deputy Superintendent of the Michigan Department of Education, we came and visited, and she was so extraordinarily impressed with the curriculum, the manner in which it was taught, the engagement of the students, and the opportunities that the students had, and really shared that back at the Michigan Department of Education as a true point of pride, not only in our district, but in our state. So we are so grateful for your efforts. We are so proud of the program, and we are extremely proud of our current and past Globies. So thank you for being here.
Any other comments? One of my 3 children went through the Global Education Program, and I have to say from not only what I saw in her, but several of the other students that went through the program, regardless where your interests may lie, without a doubt, the program produces strong writers and strong public speakers. Freshmen coming into that program are not the same people as the seniors that walk out those doors. And those skills really benefit them as young adults, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in their college classrooms, or whether it's articulating an argument at the kitchen table. They're able to do all of that. But those really are skills that carry across whatever interest level or whatever field, as was stated, that they decide to go into. They're strong individuals. Thank you very much for bringing your program and sharing it with the board and the district tonight. The next item on our agenda this evening is item 3B, a district update from the superintendent, after which we'll take a brief 5-minute or so break in our meeting.
Thanks, President Burton. I do have a few updates for you from the past few weeks. I'd like to thank all who attended our secondary parent-teacher conferences at the middle and high school levels last week. It is a really important opportunity to engage with our parents, to highlight the efforts of our students, and to be able to communicate with you. We will be sending out a survey to parents this week, and we would welcome feedback from you, from those who were able to attend, so we can continue to enhance our processes and our opportunities to engage parents. So please look for that to come via your email. We had a terrific celebration of National Manufacturing Day on Friday, October 3rd, that involved about 600 of our middle schoolers across Holmes and Emerson and Frost, as well as friends from Clarenceville Middle School. The National Manufacturing Day on October 3rd was an opportunity made possible through our Livonia Chamber of Commerce, so a shout out to the president, Dan West, as well as Schoolcraft College. We had amazing tours at the following facilities: Alpha USA, McLaren Engineering, Roush Performance, CW Bearing USA, Burke Architectural Millworks, SA Engineering, and the Applied Sciences Building at Schoolcraft College. The goal of the program is really to expose students to the opportunities available in the area of manufacturing. We know that need is significant, and it was an opportunity to really engage students who were currently involved in some of those classes, to motivate them and excite them about the possibilities and the futures they have ahead of them. We'd like to thank each of those companies for being such gracious hosts to our students, and our own Mrs. Jenkins has a terrific article online if you'd like to read a little bit more about it. We have some students who were selected from Frost Middle School to participate in the Wayne State Middle School Honors Band Day coming up this Saturday. We have a number of students who will be taking place in an intense all-day event at Wayne State, where students will be learning several pieces of new music in one day with students from 20 school districts across the state of Michigan. The middle school band will be made up of over 100 students. 12 of them are from Livonia Public Schools. They will be working with music education majors and professors, and at the end of the day, they will be performing a concert. And so I'd like to provide congratulations to the following students: Eric Nielsen, Anna Novak, Abby Lewick, Kalina Thompson, Spencer Vasich, Tashila Ford, Harris Jasanker, Audrey Turnage, Catherine Migren, Parker Hicks, Brendan Gohl, and Hunter Pless. I did not include their instrument or grade, but needless to say, they will be creating beautiful music this Saturday, and we congratulate them for being chosen to participate. Speaking of music, I just really wanted to take a minute and acknowledge the tremendous efforts of our marching bands at our three high schools, Churchill and Franklin and Stevenson. They are not only in season performing pretty amazing halftime shows, but they're also in competition season as well. They are really tremendous individuals who are very dedicated to their craft, who spend a lot of time in the summer and throughout the year practicing. And we have much to be proud of in terms of students across the district in athletics, in the arts, and in music. But I just wanted to give a shout out. I had the opportunity to recently see all of them again in performance, and they truly are very impressive individuals who devote a lot of time and effort. So kudos to all of them. They were able to perform. My last item is to thank all of you who were able to attend the grand opening of the Performing Arts Center at Stevenson. Another point of pride as we complete Phase 4 of 5 years of bond work. And our Stevenson Marching Band got the evening kicked off for us before the ribbon cutting, and they were literally getting in cars and on their way to a competition as they left the event. So their day was a long one. But again, thank you to the Livonia community for the tremendous support, which has allowed us not only to renovate our classrooms and our schools, create these amazing performing arts centers in the auxiliary classrooms, but provide for the security and safety of our staff through the enhancements that we've made to enhance our technology and instructional equipment to provide even greater educational opportunities for our students. And really, with so many different elements, we continue to see the fruits of that labor and the support of the Livonia community in so many ways throughout our district. And so we are so very grateful to our community for that. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we will take about a 5-minute break, and then we will resume the meeting with written communications to the board. We are now at recess. Welcome back to the continuation of the Livonia Public Schools Board of Education regular meeting of 2016, I'm sorry, of October 16th, 2017. Let's see if I can get that straight. We are on item 3C, written communications. Does any board member have written communications they would like to share with the board at this time? Seeing none, we are on item 3D, audience communications. Audience communications is very intentionally a time set aside for the board to listen to members of the public, to any questions, comments, concerns that they may have. As a way of introduction, I'm going to explain briefly what the role of the board is and the role of our administration. The role of the Board of Education is to first hire and evaluate our superintendent, secondly, to set policy for the district, and third, to set the long-term or strategic planning goals for the district. Those items fall distinctly under the role of the Board of Education. Almost all other items would fall under the category of daily operations, and those we turn over to our superintendent and our administrative staff. Therefore, if your questions pertain to one of the items under which the board has direct responsibility, you could expect your response to come from the board. If your item of concern comes under the category of daily operations, your response or your help would most likely come from our administrative staff. Just as a little background there. Those who would like to participate in audience communications are asked to respect our 3-minute time limit. That is set up intentionally so that everyone has a fair amount of time and can be heard. Also, please understand that the board will be listening to comments at this time, but will not be engaging in questions and answers at this time. If any further information is needed, we will follow up with the individuals and get back with them at a time when we can all have all of the information ahead of us. I do have one blue slip of a person who would like to participate in audience communications this evening, Monica Carrigan. Monica?
Yeah.
And if you could just state your name and your address for the record, please, that would be appreciated.
Sure. My name is Monica Carrigan, and I live at 39147 Granada, Livonia, Michigan, 48154.
Thank you.
So I'm here today with my husband, Nick Carrigan, to address our concern about our son's bus transportation. Our oldest son, Landon, is 5 years old, and he is on the autism spectrum. He is in his second year of ECP at Jackson Center. He attended Roosevelt and participated in the ASD program in 2014. In addition to LPS services, my son receives ABA services from the Spark Center in Livonia. He's been receiving services from both for the last 3 years. He currently attends ABA in the morning and then goes to Jackson in the afternoon. And since 2014, he's been riding the bus to and from therapy to school, school to home. Recently, we were notified that the bus from therapy to school would no longer be provided. We were told that it was not part of his IEP that he be transported from therapy services. However, we're here today to state that in his IEP, it does not identify any location for transportation. All that is indicated that is he to wear a safety harness and be dropped off at the safest, closest location. And that's it. Nothing has been stated in any of his previous IEPs about specific locations or specific services. In past years, we have been told that Landon could be transported to wherever we would like as long as it was within city limits. Now, our ABA center, if our ABA center were outside of Livonia, I would never expect transportation to occur. However, the Spark Center is located at 5 Mile in Newburgh. To our knowledge, there are kids who are still being transported by bus to daycare centers in the district. Now, my question is, how is that different than being transported to a therapy center? Those parents are receiving and paying for a service just as my son is at his ABA center. We were encouraged to take outside ABA if offered by LPS when we started the program. Landon received services at the Butterfly Room at Roosevelt for a year. After the year passed, it was recommended by the staff that Landon move on to ECP. He needed to be with more appropriate peers and in the least restrictive environment. However, our son still needs ABA at this crucial time in his life. We understand that it is our choice to participate in private ABA, not LPS. Therefore, we accept all financial responsibilities that comes with it. We would never expect otherwise. Stop.
If you could wrap up, that would be appreciated.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. So we feel that it is the district's responsibility to help our son be transported to Jackson so he can receive the education he needs at ECP. Our son is being denied the service because of the pickup location being his ABA center. We would simply encourage you as members of the board to please look into this issue. I would hope that my son could receive the same transportation as other kids do within the district and not be denied these services. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Oquist, could you follow up on that issue?
Certainly.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the audience who would like to participate in audience communications this evening? Come forward. Thank you. Casey, is it Cervantes?
Yes.
Good evening. And if you could just state your name and your address for the record, please.
Casey Cervantes. My address is 29612 Clarita Street in Livonia, 48152.
Thank you.
I also am here for the same exact reason as Monica. I fought very hard to find a service program within Livonia and as well from the staff, the school. It was something that my son really needed and could benefit from additional services. He started over the summer and he was at summer school that transported him to, he's at ANC, which is at Schoolcraft in Merriman. So no problem at all summer long. My thing is that now the transition for an autistic child to now get dropped off to my house, thrown in the car, taken to ABA, that's 3 transitions that it took 3 people for us to carry my son in the first day that this happened. So he is now regressing because of a simple transportation issue that I just don't understand the structural difference between a daycare and an ABA service. You pull up, the person comes outside, takes the child off the bus, and goes inside. It's structurally the exact same thing. So that's my biggest thing is I don't understand why this is now being taken away from autistic children, and I almost feel it's being discriminated against. And for me, watching my child regress because of something so simple fix, it seems, I just don't understand why it was taken away.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you. Again, Mrs. Oquist, likewise, could you please follow up with this parent?
I will.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the audience who would like to participate in audience communications this evening? All right. Thank you to those of you who have shared your thoughts. It's appreciated. The next item on our agenda is item 3E, response to prior audience communications. I do not have any responses to prior audience communications at this time. Item 4 is our consent agenda, and may I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mrs. Jarvis.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the following consent agenda items as recommended by the superintendent. 5A, minutes of the regular meeting of September 18th, 2017. 5B, minutes of the special meeting of September 25th, 2017. 5C, minutes of the closed meeting of September 25th, 2017. And 6A, approval of adult education program of study.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mr. Johnson. Are there questions or comments on the consent agenda? Seeing none, Mr. Sanders, would you please take the roll?
Excuse me. Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mr. Sanders says yes. President Burden.
Yes, motion passes. And could everyone pass down their minutes of their closed session, please? The next item on our agenda is item 7, business matters, and 7A is the presentation of the financial statements for 2016-2017. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mrs. Bonnefield?
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the 2016-2017 audit report as presented by the audit firm of Plant Moran.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mrs. Smith, would you like to address this for the board, please? Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Before we dive into the financial statements, I wanted to take a minute to review with the board and the community how we did in 2016-17 as far as revenue and expenditures compared to where we thought we'd be in our budget. So just as a reminder for everybody, the board-adopted budget represents the legal authority for the school district administration to spend money. My goal is to present a budget to the board that's as close to anticipated revenue and expenditures as possible without being too aggressive, as we don't want to come in over budget on expenditures or come in under on revenue, as that means that we're spending more than what's been authorized by the board, or if we're budgeting too high of revenue, that means we're building a budget for the remaining school year as well as for the next school year, counting on revenues that potentially might not come in. So again, my goal is to present a budget that's as close as possible to where we expect to be, but without being too aggressive. So with that, I'll take you to the first page if it changes over here. I'll hand it in. Thank you, Stacy. As that's coming up too, I'll describe the first page that we'll be looking at, what you have in front of you, your packets. The first column of information that you'll see in blue is our final amendment. And that represents the budget that was approved and adopted by the board in June 2017. And thank you, Stacy. You are too far away from the screen, possibly. There we go. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So this first column of information in blue is our final budget amendment, which was adopted by the board in June 2017. We expected to have an ending fund balance of $14 million, or a 9.36% fund balance. How we actually did, our expenditures came in at, our revenue came in at $150.7 million compared to the $149.1 million that we anticipated. That's an increase of $1.6 million. And on the expenditure side, our final expenditures were $142.3 million, and we anticipated expenditures of $143.5 million, and that's a difference of $1.2 million. That means we came in $1.2 million better on expenditures than what we anticipated. The result of that is a $16.7 million fund balance as of June 30th, 2017, or 11.07%. What the next column in pink represents is the proposed budget for 17-18 that was adopted by the board in June. And the final column in orange represents our first budget amendment, which we'll be taking to the board in the next couple months. And what I've done is taken the final ending balance as of June 30th, 2017, that's the $16.7 million, and put that in as our beginning fund balance for 17-18 to show you how that positively impacts our budget for 17-18. What I haven't done is adjusted the revenue and expenditures. Those still match what the proposed budget was that was presented in June. So we're starting to get more information in. We've done our first student count. We also have our staffing in place now, so at our upcoming meetings, I'll be updating the revenues and expenditures for you as well. So we can see just by coming in better in revenue and expenditures than where we thought we would be, I'm anticipating a $16.8 million fund balance at the end of this school year, which would be 11.35%. And just to take a moment to explain why it's so important to have that fund balance. Having a financial cushion allows the district to avoid drastic changes In educational programs or employee layoffs during the school year, a healthy fund balance is needed for the financial stability of the school district, for flexibility in dealing with unanticipated emergencies such as mid-year reductions from the state, also to better manage the effects of declining enrollment, also to avoid interest costs from borrowing needs. And lastly, a healthy fund balance is also used favorably by bond rating agencies. So that's a benefit to our local taxpayers because if we go out to get a bond, that means we'll be getting better interest rates on those bonds. So altogether, there's a myriad of reasons why it's so important to have a healthy fund balance. On the next slide, I'm going to take you through the detail of the final budget to actual. As I mentioned, we had a $1.6 million variance on the revenue. We came in $1.6 million better, and that really does sound like a lot of money. And same on the revenue or expenditure side, we came in $1.2 million on the expenditure side. So down below is a breakdown of what makes up that difference. So on the revenue side, the $1 million in local revenue came in higher than anticipated, and what makes that up is property taxes and program income. So I will continue to tweak my processes for evaluating what our revenues will be for that area, and I do believe we can get closer on that number. On the state revenue side, our revenues were $1.4 million better, and that was specifically regarding the center program. Our center program expenses came in lower than anticipated, and we get state funding that comes into the general fund, and then based on our expenditures in the center program, we have to move some of the revenue over to the center program. And because the center program expenditures were a little lower than we anticipated, that meant we didn't have to transfer as much revenue over to the center program. So $0.4 million better on that area. Lastly is other sources, $0.2 million better for incoming transfers, and that's incoming transfers from other funds. So we were able to transfer a little more than anticipated from the food service fund and the grants fund, and those are indirect cost transfers. And just a little, so indirect cost to what that is in the food service fund as well as in grants. The awarding agencies recognize that there's indirect costs that go into running a food service program or running, for instance, the Title I program. And so those Title Is are charged to the grant and then put in as revenues into the general fund to cover costs such as the business office time, running payroll, the HR time, hiring staff to work in those programs. So in total, we came in $1.6 million better in revenue, and that's a 1.1% variance. So very happy with that, but going to try my best to get that even closer for next year. On the expenditure side, we came in better in salary and benefits by $54,000, which I'm very excited about that. Our salary and benefits represent 90% of our budget, or $128 million. So to come in within $54,000 is, like I said, very excited about that. The next line item is purchase services, coming in better by $300,000, and what goes into that line are subs, building repairs, electricity, heat, and water. And in this category, I hope always will have some kind of balance left in that account because we start working on our budget in March, April, and we run it through the study sessions and through committee meetings, and then we finally take it to the board in June for formal approval. But when we're putting the budget together, we can't anticipate emergencies that are going to arise for the remainder of the school year, so we have to budget for those items. With the utilities, maybe the prices are going to go up, so we always have to make sure that we have enough money authorized by the board in the budget to pay those bills. The next item is supplies. Kind of similar reasons to the purchase services. I'll explain first the main balances there are maintenance supplies. So these would be repair supplies if something broke at our building and we had to buy some supplies to fix that. Also transportation supplies, including fuel. So always needing to have some cushion there, not knowing exactly what the bills will be for the last couple months of the school year. But when we are putting the budget together, we do look at historical trends, and we also look at like a 5-year average when we're coming up with our estimates. So something to keep in mind. The next item down is other expenditures, and that came in better by $300,000. And what that is, the main thing that came in better was uncollectible taxes written off. We've had a steady decrease in the amount of uncollectible taxes over the years, and so we had a pretty dramatic decrease this past year. So not, again, being able to count on that, because sometimes, bills will come in, or refunds to issue, or write-offs will come in June. So we always need to, again, have some cushion in that account to anticipate some of those items. Lastly, there's transfers. Came in better by $100,000. So that's transfers to other funds. I had mentioned on the revenue side how our expenditures came in better in the center program. Our expenditures for the least restrictive environment aides, who are currently being charged to the center program, also came in a little bit better on the expenditure side. So that meant we had to do a smaller transfer to the center program to cover those items. So with that, these past two slides have been a very simplified version of our financial statements. The financial statements go into much more detail. And before we even get close to publishing our financial statements, a lot of work has to be done to close our financial books at the end of the school year. At the end, the year-end process starts with providing transaction-level detail for every single budget code to our auditors, our external auditors, Plant Moran, who then come out to the district for 3 weeks during the summer to comb through our records. They pull invoices to make sure that the payments have been authorized, that it's gone out to bid if required, that it's being charged appropriately. They look at the bank statements and reconciliations to make sure that's all been properly recorded on our ledger. They review employee contracts and tie them back to payroll records. They review our processes and procedures to make sure that we have proper controls in place. So all of that takes place before we're able to present the financial statements before you tonight. So with that, I am going to turn things over to Plant Moran. We have Lisa Vargo, Tom Marchese, and Aubrey D. here with us.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. It's my pleasure to be able to present to the board the financial results for the fiscal year ended 2017. My name is Lisa Vargo. I'm a partner at Plant Moran in our K-12 practice. And with me I have Tom Marchese, who's a manager in our K-12 practice. Tom's going to be going over some of the graphs to present to the board. But before that, I just wanted to kind of take a step back and really describe what goes into an audit. Allison did a fantastic job describing some of the documents that we look at, but I'd like to kind of take a little bit from our perspective about how much work and time goes into for us to be able to stand here today. So the first thing I just want to do is thank Allison and her team, because without Allison and her team, they spend a ton of time getting ready for us to come out to the field. In addition to that, just the courtesy and the help that they provide to just be able to be here today, we greatly appreciate. So ultimately, with the audit, at the end of the day, the board gets 3 deliverables. You get a financial statement, you get a single audit report, and you get a letter. So you get a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of information that kind of funnels in order to present the financial statements. The financial statements are really the ownership of the districts. It's all the district's information accumulated together. We, Plant Moran, provide a service pulling it together. The only thing that's Plant Moran's is really the opinion. That's what you hire us to do. And so we are able to place an opinion on the basic financial statements and the single audit report. So on both of those reports, we were able to issue an unmodified opinion, which really is the highest level of assurance that we can provide you that your financial statements are free of material misstatement. So that's for the basic audit. I'd like to just take one moment and talk about the single audit. The single audit is really a compliance audit. So the level of what we need to look at is much more in detail. So annually, we have to go and look at all your federal expenditures. We go through a calculation so we can determine what your major program is. Then once your major program is selected, this year it was the IDEA program, we go through using the federal guides and we make sure every little compliance item is being followed. If something is not being followed, it is our requirements to report that to the board. So through that process, we had no findings. Our sample selection is very high. Through the process of doing that, we look at a lot of original documents. And as I just said, any type of modification between what is required from the federal government, we are required to report to the board. And we had no findings there. The other piece of information that the board has is what we refer to as our end of audit letter. We also refer to it as the AU 260 letter. Essentially what this letter is it gives us the opportunity as auditors to say to the board, everything went according to plan or it didn't go according to plan. So I'm happy to present that everything went according to plan. If we as auditors identified any journal entries, any proposed journal entries, had any disagreements with management, any significant changes to the financial statement, this letter we are required to report to the board. But again, I'm happy to report that as we planned the audit, everything went according to plan. This letter is also the avenue in which if we had a reportable finding, we would need to report it to the board. When we begin the audit, even before we hit field work, we do a lot of brainstorming, we do a lot of fraud assessments, we do a lot of let's think what could go wrong, and we tailor our audit approach accordingly. We interview the staff here so we can assess the internal controls. We go through, we do not opine on the internal controls, but we do assess them. And it is our requirement as auditors, if we identify anything that says that those charged with government should know that something is not up to par, we are required to report that to the board. And we had no such findings this year. So I'm very happy about that. Everything went according to plan, and we had no issues. So as I indicated, there are 3 phases of field work. We do the pre-field work, which is in our office. It's the brainstorming, it's the assessment of controls, and then we come out here for field work. We have a team of 3 that come out to the field here and work full days for 3 weeks, and we're constantly requesting documents. So we do some pre-requests of documents, and then we also request documents when we're in the field. And we purposely do that because we don't want to select a sample and have ample time pass until we come out here. So a lot of the samples we are choosing while we are in the field. And as I indicated, that we're here for at least 3 weeks. And then we have our post-field work. During our post-field work, we go back to the office, and that's when we accumulate all the information. We prepare the financial statements, we meet with Allison and her group, and we have meetings, and we make sure that we're all on the same page and everything is reported appropriately. And that, with all that work, we funnel into those 3 documents: financial statements, single audit, and the letter to the board. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tom and let him go over a few of the graphs.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So this graph was prepared just to highlight a few of the aspects of the deliverable documents that we Here we have slide 1. Presentation just highlights 4 major funds presented separately: the General Fund, the Special Education Center Fund, the Building and Repairs Fund, 2013 Bond Series 2 Fund, along with the non-major governmental subtotal. Together we have assets totaling up $137 million across the district at the fund level. Of those assets, $47 million in the General Fund on the far left. Those are represented mostly by unrestricted cash and investments and state aid receivables for July and August. Within the Building and Repairs Fund and the 2013 Bond Series 2 Fund, we have about $76 million of restricted assets. Those are unspent sinking fund millage proceeds and bond proceeds. Total liabilities across at a fund level amount to $41 million. You can see the major component of that is within the General Fund at $30.7 million. The biggest liability within the General Fund represents summer payrolls for teachers. Fund balance at the fund level is 96 million. The biggest components of the fund balance are within the general fund at 16.5 million of unassigned fund equity. And then we have restricted fund balance within the building and repairs fund and the 2013 Series 2 fund of 56.8 million. On slide 3, Allison went into some detail on the final budget to actual numbers. I'll just highlight a couple main points. So this is the general fund statement of revenue, expenditures, and changes in fund balance compared to the budget. You can see that revenue and other sources is 1.5 million above the budget levels. That's a favorable variance of 1%. Expenditures at year end amounted to 142. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Expenditures are 142 million compared to 143.4 million budgeted. That's 1.16 million favorable under budget, which represents, again, 1%. These two favorable budget variances caused a $2.7 million above budgeted increase in fund balance at year end. So the actual increase in general fund balance, you can see in the middle of the schedule, is 8.369 million. And at June 30th, 2017, we have 16.7 million total general fund balance. That represents 11.7% of expenditures at year end. And that's a fairly standard metric used to assess what level of fund balance you have. I apologize, it says July 30th, that's a typo. Slide 4. We have some commentary on the GASB 68 implementation. GASB 68, this is, we've had the discussion in previous years, but this is just a reminder. It's an allocated share of the unfunded pension portion of the retirement system for teachers. So the district is required to report The district is required to report this pension obligation along with all the other schools in the district. And just one last item to point out is the last bullet point, GASB 75. These OPEB costs mostly relate to health benefits of the pension, or of the retirement system, will be included in your report at June 30, 2018. So this is another significant liability that's going to be on your government-wide statement of net position at the end of next year. Moving on to slide 5. We have a schedule that lays out the total assets, total liabilities, and net position or fund balance on both the government-wide and fund level. So you can see that there's 136 million of assets at the fund level and total liabilities of 40.6 million. Fund balance total across the district is 96 million. On the government-wide level, you can see an increase in assets, 352.7 million. That's due to the fact we're including capital assets within this government-wide number. $264 million of liabilities on the government-wide level, compared to $40 million of liability at the fund level, includes long-term liabilities, most prominently the bond obligations. And then we also factor out the GASB 68 impact of $260 million. This represents the GASB 68 amounts, the pension-related items, and that results in a negative or a deficit net position of $171.9 million at June 30th, 2017. On slide 6, we have a pie chart of the general fund revenues. A couple areas to highlight here. Out of the $150.7 million of general fund revenue, $113 million, or 77% of the revenue, is state-derived. Most of that relates to the foundation allowance, which is driven by pupil count. Local source revenue, which includes property taxes, represents about 19.5% of the district's revenues. And we also have a separate segment of the pie chart related to the Wayne County Enhancement Millage of $4.6 million. That's 5% of the district's overall revenue. That was passed as part of current year ballots, and it is due to flow through 2022. One other item to note, in this general fund information, we did exclude funded projects and athletic fund activity. That's a disclaimer at the bottom of prior two slides. General fund expenditures during the year were $142.3 million. You can see that salaries and employee benefits represent the vast chunk of this pie chart. 90% of total expenditures within the general fund relate to salary and benefits, which is standard across Michigan school districts. I'll hand slide 8 off to Lisa.
Okay, so the next chart that we're going to go over real briefly is a line graph illustrating the revenues and expenditures over since 2009. The reason why we wanted to point this slide out is back in 2012, that's when there was the approximately $470 per pupil count reduction in the state funding. So we wanted to just point this out because, as you can see, it kind of took the dip in 2012, and although your revenues have been increasing since then, we still have not caught up to that pre-2012 reduction. The next graph shows the student membership trend since 2009. We wanted to show this because this is one of the fixed factors that is used in calculating the state revenue, is the pupil count. So unfortunately, as with many districts, we are seeing a steady decline in the number of students. The next graph represents another history since 2009 of the fund balance as a percent of expenditures. This is an indicator of the fiscal health of the district. And as we've talked about through this presentation, as of the fiscal year ending 2017, you can see the percent of the fund balance went up to 11.72%. The state average is 11.1%, so you're right at about the state average, which is great. The one thing to kind of keep in mind is that the goal of a healthy fund balance would be about 15 to 20%. And the last slide that we want to cover with the board today is a history since 2017 of the retirement funding expenditure requirement. Again, this number continues to grow. Essentially, for the fiscal year ending 2017, we've highlighted the bar graph into two sections. The pink section above really represents the Section 147 state aid payments, and we also refer to those as like the flow-through. So that is funded by the 10% flow-through. There's no control of that through the district, and the remaining portion is the unsubsidized retirement cost. This is an area of great uncertainty. Right now, we're in a good economy, so we've been able to have that flow through, assist with that. But again, these type of expenditures do provide some uncertainty of these type of expenses. Does the board have any questions?
Questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Bonnefield.
Hi. We're very excited to hear that we have a really great positive fund balance and that that's increasing, that the district has been extremely fiscally responsible in making that happen. But is there
any way you can touch a little bit on the difference between having a healthy fund balance and adequate funding to the school district, in the fact that even though we're increasing the fund balance so that we can operate at a more consistent level, that the state of Michigan still is not funding us appropriately, and that we have a lot of deficits that we still have not, I don't want, deficits isn't the right word in this scenario, but there's a lot of expenditures that we have not been able to recover and provide to the students, still with the remaining inadequacy of funding.
Yeah, and I think keeping the eye on the ball for the fund balance is the key thing, because as we continue to have the uncertainty of future type of retirement costs, or as Tom indicated, we're going to have to put the OPEB-type liabilities on your financial statements. It's important to keep the eye on the ball, I guess is the great way to put it, for your fund balance, so you can continue to provide the student support when the uncertainty of potential decreases in revenues do come your way.
So I'd like to speak to that specifically. As I know the board is aware, because we've discussed it and I've shared updates with them, Senate Bill 574 that's before the legislature currently is looking at the including additional revenue sources for public school academies and charter schools out of the ISD enhancement millages. So for instance, you saw in our pie chart, we've collected just over $4.6 million to date from the Wayne County enhancement millage. If that legislation were to be enacted, there's a lack of clarity at this point in time whether that would be immediate with regard to the next collection, or whether or not that would take place after a renewal of the millage. If that were to be immediate, that's certainly one of the areas I know that we've discussed internally as being essential to have the fund balance where we are, because that would be a significant, almost $90 per student decrease that would come, about a $1.3 million differential from what we have already budgeted for this year. So those types of variances, when we talk about changes with regard to legislation or other pieces, I think are also factors, Mrs. Bonifield, that impact our planning, and that we always want to be as fiscally sound as we can to prepare for, that was an unforeseen potential. And again, we're not certain where or when, if that legislation is passed, that would begin. But that's, to me, another example of those uncertainties that you discussed at the committee meeting that allow us to benefit from a healthier fund balance than we've seen in recent years.
Are there other questions? Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. I was wondering, Lisa, when you presented this to us earlier, I'm looking at the last chart, which has the MIPSR's expenses.
Yes.
You mentioned a comment about how that relates to the claims for the state funding, and how much money legislators have been saying they've been giving to public education. I wondered if you would explain that and repeat it for those who are watching from home.
Yes. So there's two sections of this bar graph. If we focus on 2017, we have the section 147 state aid payment. That represents the lighter pink section of that bar graph. The remaining is the unsubsidized retirement cost, which is really the direct cost of the district. So it's a 36% of your payroll cost. 10% is, it's that flow through. So it's just coming in and it's going right out. So there's no benefit, there's no classroom education or any other type of benefit that's kind of coming in with that 10% revenue that's just going straight out. The remaining 26% are the expenditures of the district.
So even though we're receiving money from the state, it's not money that we can do anything with other than turn it around and hand it right back.
That is correct. And
so even though technically we're getting more money than we ever had, it's not money that we can use for anything.
That revenue is reported as part of your state sources, and it's going right back out.
So it's just a play on words.
To add to that, though, if the state incurs a fiscal hardship, 36% of every dollar you pay out for employees will be fronted by the district. So while it is a ploy, it's not a certainty for the future that the state will continue funding.
Right.
Mr. Centers.
Just another comment on that. I think if you hear legislators talk, oftentimes they make it sound like districts by themselves have incurred these burdens when, in fact, we've learned going through our various conferences that there's times when the state has taken money from this fund, not funded it properly, and as a result, it's exacerbated this problem. Again, they passed a buyout some years back where it gave people a very large multiplier, thinking that our issues in 2007, 2008 would be very quickly recovered. And so while our teachers and districts have significant costs with retirement, these have been exacerbated by the state in a lot of ways.
I mean, this really is the, kind of greatest area of uncertainty.
Other comments from other board members? Got just a couple of comments. I'm grateful to the work of everybody in this district, and it has been everybody that has helped us to get to a fund balance where we are right now. There are at least a few board members who were on the board when we incurred over a $400 per student cut, and that came in October of a year. Our student count was established. Our staff was hired for the year. Everything was budgeted out for the year, and all of a sudden we had millions of dollars that were not going to come at the stroke of a pen from Lansing. And we did not get much of a warning that it was coming. It just came. I'm grateful for the folks in this district who have worked very hard, and that includes every single person in this district. Parent volunteers, staff members, board members, our administrative team, everyone has chipped in. There have been employee concessions over the years that have helped us to get to the point where we have a fund balance where we could weather a storm like that, because that is the responsibility of this board, is to make sure that we're going to be able to weather a storm. And unfortunately, in the last 10 years, we've seen that we have had storms. The light pink area of that graph is an enormous concern, because at the decision of the legislature, that additional $10 million could be on the backs of the district directly. And I just need for the public to understand how very serious and how very real that possibility is. I'd like to commend our finance department for coming in just over 1% within budget. When I think of our own household budgets, if we were to hold ourselves to that 1% on both revenues and expenditures, that's a pretty tough accomplishment. That we have a large budget, but we have a lot of employees, a lot of expenditures. So thank you so much for working so hard and coming so close on right at zero. I mean, I know for the years I've sat on the board, plus or minus 2% has always been the goal. So at 1.1%, you're to be commended. Thank you. I think that's about it. Other points have been covered by other board members already. Are there any other comments from anybody else on the board or the superintendent? Thank you so much for your work and the confidence that our Board of Education has had in Plant Moran Cressa. Plant Moran Cressa just comes out of my mouth. Plant Moran, rather. It is a comfort to know that you folks have such a high level of expertise in education, and it is wonderful to hear that we have yet again another unmodified opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda.
We have to vote.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you. We have a motion. Hold on a moment, please. We have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mr. Centers, would you please take the roll?
Mrs. Bonifield.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. President Burden.
Yes. The motion passes. The next item on our agenda is not as exciting unless it is January. Our item 7B is the approval of the bulk salt purchase. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mrs. Frank.
move that the Board of Education of Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of bulk road salt from Morton Salt Company through the State of Michigan My Deal Extended Purchasing Program for a total cost of $46,455.
Support. We have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Bonifield. Mr. Francis, would you like to address this item for the board?
Yes, thank you very much. The bulk salt purchase is the annual purchase getting ready for Old Man Winter. We are proposing the contractual purchase of 1,500 tons of bulk salt. With that contract, as in past years, we're required to purchase 70% of that amount. It's based upon, weather dependent. We can also, in a very heavy winter, can go 30% above the 1,500. So it gives us a range within that amount. Similar number that we used last year. It's fluctuated over the past several years, up and down, based upon the winters we've had or the amount. We can store a little bit over the summer to come into the season with a few tons, but in the end, we do need to purchase them in preparation for the winter. So we do recommend approval of this item so we can be prepared for the winter months.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there questions or comments on this item? Mr. Centers?
Bill, remind me how this pricing compares to last year.
Oh, goodness. It is a significant decrease from last year. I do not have my memo in front of me. I apologize. It was
like
something 11 something per ton lower, so it's a significant savings from last year. It's actually gone down the past 2 years.
That's great. Thank you.
My apologies for not having the number in front of me. I thought my memo was in here.
No worries.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Bonifield. Mr. Centers, would you please take the roll?
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. President Burden.
Yes, the motion passes. The next item is item 7C, approval to purchase furniture for Western Wayne Skills Center students at Garfield Community School, 2013 Bond Capital Projects Fund. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mr. Johnson.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of student furniture from Interior Environments of Novi, Michigan through the Cooperative Purchasing Network, TCPN, contract for a total cost of $31,039.85.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Bradford. Mr. Francis.
Thank you. The furniture that we're proposing to purchase out of the 2013 bond fund is for the student lounge at the currently being renovated Garfield Community School for the Western Wayne Skills Center program that's due to move there in January. We are using the former LMC area to create a new student lounge for the 18 to 26-year-old students who attend that program. It's going to be a multi-purpose room, more of a young adults area than a traditional high school area. Students will be able to collaborate there. They'll be able to eat their lunch there. It will be a student-centered area. So the purchase of these furniture pieces is recommended for fulfillment of the furniture needed in that area.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from the board?
And just to throw in, the contract pricing through the TCPN does, in fact, fulfill the board's duty to bid because it has already been bid by the contract entity, cooperative entity.
And it's exciting seeing furniture like this going into this center. It's much like that you would see in a student center of a college campus, which is appropriate for our 18 to 26-year-old students who are ready for not necessarily being on a college campus, but they're ready for certainly being out of a high school environment. So it's exciting.
Correct. We're excited for that. I know Dr. Terrial and Mr. Meese, the principal of the program, is very excited to have something different. And in fact, several of us are very excited to see it once it all goes in place because we want to show it off as a bit of a model for even some of our other secondary buildings of what can be done as a general community space.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Bradford. Mr. Centers, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. President Burden.
Yes, motion passes. The next item on our agenda is item 7D, approval of bid results for Webster LMC Air Conditioning 2013 bond. May I have a motion, please?
President Burden.
Mr. Centers?
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase and installation of an air conditioning unit from Contrast Mechanical, Macomb Township, Michigan, for a total cost of $27,500.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mr. Francis?
Thank you. This is a project that was actually slated to be done next summer during the summer of 2018 bond work that's going to be happening at Webster. Unfortunately, the air conditioning unit that was there didn't agree with us. It decided it wanted to go a little bit early. So we did have to, came to the conclusion that we were just going to move up on the timetable. Same funding, same process. We bid this out. We had a bid coverage. 6 different contractors had bid on it, and Contrast, it was the low at $27,500. We're essentially just moving up for the fall, winter time, the work that would have been done next summer in an effort to have air conditioning in that area come spring again when the weather warms up. We do have computers in the LMC. It needs to be air conditioned, as well as an adjoining computer lab, which needs to be air conditioned. So we had, for this fall, done some temporary things to get by with regard to cooling, but we recommend the approval of this so we can have the work done in time for the spring season.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other, any comments from members of the board or the superintendent? Mrs. Bonnefield?
Mr. Francis, most of our buildings are not air conditioned. Could you maybe explain a little bit why the air conditioning is in this location and what the extra needs are that require this air conditioning?
Vast majority of our buildings are not air conditioned throughout 100%, but they all are air conditioned in certain areas that are needed. For example, interior rooms or rooms that have computer labs or sets of computers in them. So our LMCs are air conditioned across the district, and our computer labs are air conditioned across the district.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mr. Centers, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Centers says yes. Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
President Burden?
Yes, motion passes. The next item on our agenda is item 8, personnel matters, and 8A is teacher for approval. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mrs. Bradford?
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and offer employment to the teacher listed on the attached document.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Bonnefield. Mr. McDonald?
Thank you, President Burton. The individual that we are presenting to the board this evening is qualified to fill the position and has been fully vetted. Through our extensive interview process, we are confident that she will perform at a high level and represent Livonia Public Schools in a manner that is consistent with our shared vision and collective commitments. This position has been included in the 17-18 budget and is in an area of need. And we are pleased to be recommending such a talented individual and are excited to get her in front of our students.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from members of the board?
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations, welcome. We have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Bonnefield. Mr. Centers, would you please take the roll?
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. President Burden?
Yes, motion passes. Congratulations and welcome to Livonia Public Schools. The next item on our agenda is item 8B, resignation, and this is for information purposes only. This is not an item upon which the board needs to vote. Item 8C is retirements. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Yes, Mrs. Jarvis.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached resolutions of appreciation for the services rendered by Frederica Bahora, Georgia Bledsoe Benyeki, Konstantinos Basidis, and Karam Calkins.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mr. Johnson. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, President Burton. Tonight, we are bringing before you 4 employees who will be retiring very soon. As these employees leave the Livonia Public Schools, they take with them a combined total of 103.4 years of service. On behalf of the administration, I would like to thank these employees for their dedicated years of service they have provided the students of the Livonia Public Schools, and I ask that the board adopts the attached resolutions of appreciation for these retirees.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from members of the board or the superintendent?
Just thank you.
Wish them well.
Yeah.
Miss you.
Congratulations, and we wish you well in your next chapter of your life. We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mr. Johnson. Mr. Centers, would you please take the roll?
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mr. Centers says yes. President Burden.
Yes, motion passes. The next item on our agenda is item 9, hearing from board members. 9A is first reading of board policies. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mrs. Bonnefield.
the Policy Committee has reviewed the attached proposed language for the following policies. A, B, C, C, board member term of office. A, F, C, emergency closings of schools. B, G, A, membership in associations. D, F, G, fees, payments, and rentals. E, B, H, leasing and renting. K, G, community use of school facilities. K, I, material distribution in schools. K, M, visits to schools. K, N, public complaints. L, D, A, J, A, security footage. M, K, accreditation.
This is a first reading of board policies, and therefore we will not be voting on them tonight. They will be voted upon at the next meeting. Therefore, we do not need a second on this item at this time. However, I will turn this over to Mrs. Oquist, who will briefly run through these policies, and then we will be putting them on the agenda for a vote at our next voting meeting. Mrs. Oquist.
Thank you, President Burton. We do have a number of policies, however, the changes are relatively minimal. We did review these policies at our last committee of the whole meeting. In some cases, they're modifications of a word or two, or perhaps a phrase, to better either represent current law, current policy, or current practice. We would consider many of these a bit of a cleanup. However, we'd like to go through these as it is the first reading. The first is the bylaw of the board ABCC under district organization and board member term of office. It indicates that the board members are elected biennially during even year general elections, serving for a term of 4 years on a rotating basis. It indicates that the term shall commence on January 1st of the year immediately following the election and continue through December 31st of the 4th year. That follows current legislation and our current practice, and the changes are made to reflect that. Are there any questions from the board? Second one, bylaw of the board, AFC, district organization, emergency closing of schools. The primary changes with regard to this bylaw was with regard to the method by which we would notify staff, students, and parents. And really, the inclusion of email, social media, and the district website were the main portions that are added, which were not a part of the original options back in 1988. It also indicates that school personnel, parents and guardians, and students shall be attentive to announcements of possible irregular schedules for school. So it, one, indicates a responsibility on the part of the district to provide the notification, and also a request that those folks also be attentive to announcements regarding any changes in schedule. Essentially, those are the main changes of that, and you'll see the wording, any of the wording changes either with strike through or marked in red.
Any questions on that item?
No.
Okay, bylaws of the board BGA. This was originally, the original policy as listed was from June 20th of 1988. It was reviewed in December of 2013. Again, the only change on this item, which is a current reflection, is to indicate that the district will annually renew memberships in both the Wayne County Association of School Boards and the Michigan Association of School Boards. It has removed the National School Board Association from which we would participate annually. which is reflective of current practice. Okay. The next one is Board Policy DFG, Fiscal Management, Fees, Payments, and Rentals. As you take a look at this policy, it certainly indicates that the rental of school property and use of buildings by outside agencies is allowed and shall conform to the school district and school building use policies. The additional language indicates Livonia Public Schools School District is permitted to charge appropriate fees for the use of its facilities, and that the first priority for use of school property is for district purposes. You will also see a modification on the bottom of the policy with regard to cross-references to two other policies to which I will be referring momentarily. Any questions on that? Good. Okay. Board, yes.
Sorry. Is there, I know we have administrative procedures of which the board is not responsible for, but does that go through and list the restrictions? How do the renters know what the restrictions are for the use of the building? The first example that comes to my thought is we don't smoke on campus or in the buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And how is that?
We do have guidelines as part of the rental policies and agreements and contracts that we make with the outside agencies.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Board Policy EBH is with regard to leasing and renting. This indicates essentially the same as in Policy DFG. The only change is with regard to the cross-reference at the bottom. And finally, the third related policy on that item, Board Policy KG, we've added the use of community use of school facilities. And again, the language is identical to the prior policy DFG. And again, the cross-reference, so that all three policies, even though they're intended to be the same and reflect the same language, they are located in three different sections of our board policy. Therefore, we would recommend continuing to have separate policies so that if folks are looking for the policy within one section or another, they're able to find that. But we wanted to update the cross-reference to those policies. Okay? All righty. Board Policy KI. This is with regard to material distribution in schools. The change is on the second line of the policy, where it previously stated, only authorized information and materials are to be given to students to carry home. We've struck through given to students to carry home and simply said, only authorized information and materials are to be distributed. As we know, there are many ways other than carrying paperwork home that we now send information. So that reflects that current practice. Any questions?
No.
All right. We have we did discuss obviously each of these
Yes.
last week.
Yeah.
Detail, so folks at home are feeling that we're giving these a cursory glance. We did discuss most of these in detail last week at our committee of the whole meeting. If you'd like to have a chance to listen to a little bit more dialogue. Board Policy KM, General Public Relations and Visits to Schools. Certainly, the first portion of this policy indicates that parents are welcome visitors in the schools, and for the protection of and welfare of our students and staff, we ask that visitors report first to the school's main office for visitation approval, and that there are really three elements that should be present if a parent chooses to visit a classroom. This visit should be arranged in advance, have the approval of the building principal or administrator, and not disrupt the educational process. The intent is the same as it has been for many, many years. There was simply a bit of cleanup of language to make that even clearer. Okay. Board Policy KN, General Public Relations as a regarding public complaints. So it simply removes the first phrase, the Board of Education believes that complaints, and then it goes on to et cetera, and how they should be handled and resolved. We've simply taken out that statement and stated complaints, including those concerning instructional matters and employees, et cetera, and then how they should be resolved. So simply indicating that beyond the Board of Education, including the district administration, would agree that they are best handled and resolved as close to their origin as possible, and then it goes on to talk about any appeal concerning those complaints. So the only change is to remove the initial wording, the Board of Education believes that. All righty, moving right along. Do I still have everyone with me?
Over here.
Board Policy LDAJA, interorganizational relations and security footage. This is with regard to indicating that security cameras may be present not only on school district premises, but also on our buses. As you know, part of the safety and security enhancements as provided by the bond issue is that we've been able to not only purchase new buses, but we have been able to purchase a security system which allows for security cameras and retention of that footage for the buses. So it indicates that the security footage would be kept, used, or routinely erased as determined by administration, and the district preserves footage and will retain it until no longer needed or required. So really, it's just an update of language, and also indicates, as we always do, that signs would be posted notifying the public that school premises are monitored by cameras. All set? Yep. Okay. We're almost there. Board Policy MK, relations with other educational agencies with regard to accreditation. Previously, this board policy referred to North Central Association of Colleges and Schools. As you know, that is no longer an association that exists. Therefore, the new statement states, Livonia Public Schools School District will maintain accreditation status through Advance Ed or a current accreditation provider, and that is reflective of current practice.
Any questions on any of those policies? No? This is one item that is a phenomenal example of, if you want to hear a lot of discussion, tune into the Committee of the Whole, because we kind of beat these little itty-bitty changes to death. But we're going to go ahead and barring no comments from the board on these at this time, we will put them on an agenda for a vote at the next voting meeting next month. The next item on our agenda is item 9B. It has been the practice of this Board of Education, under hearing from board members, rather than having seven of us repeat largely the same thanks and congratulations, to ask one of our board members to do that on behalf of the members of the Board of Education. Tonight, Mrs. Frank will be taking care of that for the Board of Education, and certainly if any other board members have any comments afterward, you're welcome to chime in. Mrs. Frank.
Thank you, President Burton. Before we came down to our meeting, we were upstairs and we met with the Livonia Parent-Teacher-Student Association, and it was a lovely time for us to meet with their council and really connect with the people who are making a difference in each building. And so we just wanted to, on behalf of the board, say thank you to the PTSA Council and to all the members who really make a difference and who are so involved in our school districts and really help to enhance all of our students and our staff's education and their experience at each school. So it was wonderful to meet each of them, and they go above and beyond for our students in our schools. So thank you to each of them. We had a lovely presentation from the Global Education Department at Stevenson, and that was such a neat point of pride to highlight for our district and to hear from a former student, a current student, and the faculty was just phenomenal to see. As Superintendent Oquist mentioned, we had our parent-teacher conferences this week for 7th and 8th grade and as well as high schools. And it was wonderful also to see so many parents at the conferences and really engaged in their students' progress and wanting to connect with the teachers. So I have heard lots of feedback from it. Again, Mrs. Oquist said we're going to have a survey that comes out. Please fill out that survey so that we can get a good picture of where you are as a parent, if we're meeting your needs in terms of parent-teacher conferences. As Mrs. Oquist said, Saturday we have Band Day at Wayne State University. There are also some home students that are attending that, so I think that there are some home students as well as Frost, and I'm not sure if Emerson is as well, but it's going to be a phenomenal day for those students. The biggest piece that we did tonight was Plant Moran presented to the board our audit. And Allison, we just wanted to, on behalf of the board, thank you and your staff for all the work that you did. And again, as President Burton said, that you were so close this year in all of your projections and the amendments. It was amazing. So we had an unmodified report, which is the highest level. So thank you, and thank you to your entire team for that. As we were going through, Plant Moran did such a great job of not only providing us with the financial details, but some of the things that they said is for us as a board that the district must be proactive and plan strategically in managing contracts, offering programs to attract students, and investing in technology and infrastructure to budget for sustainability. And I think that the board takes that very seriously, and it was great to hear us talk about what is the state of education, where are we going in the future. And it does not look like any of our school aid fund is going to increase at a rate that's higher than the rate of inflation. And so we really need to be diligent as a board as well as the cabinet in taking care of what we are financially responsible for. So it was great to hear that, and it was great advice coming from Plant Moran, who really does this on a day-to-day basis. And all of our updated policies, Mrs. Oquist, you read it like it was so easy, but it was not easy last week when we talked through each one and tweaked it and changed it, and what about this wording and what about that wording, and does it really encompass all that we want to say as a board? So it took a lot longer last week, but you captured everything very well, and so we wanted to also thank Jill. Thank you for typing it all up and keeping track of everything and really going through these policies to make sure that we do have updated policies for everything that we need as a board. So thank you to the whole staff and the cabinet who's going through different policies. I think that's all that I had. So it was a great week for LPS, and I think it's exciting as we're getting a month into the school district to see what's going on in each of the buildings. So, and this week we have elementary conferences. Is that right, Mrs. Oquist? Elementary conferences?
They are this week, Wednesday and Thursday. So we have half days of school for our K4 and 5-6 students. We are excited to welcome our parents in for afternoon and evening conferences, and they should have set up a time with their school, either their teacher directly or with the school. And if you have not had an opportunity to do that, please contact your child's principal, and we will certainly help you with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Are there other members of the board who would like to add anything this evening? Mr. Centers.
If anyone would like to attend the foundation lunch, how do they do that?
Thank you. Yes. We have our LPS Education Foundation Luncheon on November 8th. We are very excited. We have a tremendous guest speaker. Our keynote speaker is Ron Fournier, who is publisher and editor of Crane's Detroit Business Daily. And we are thrilled to welcome him to Livonia for this event. And Steve Courtney will be back again, I think for his 10th year as our MC. Always very entertaining. And the event will be held on November 8th at noon at St. Mary's Cultural Center. If you would like a ticket, they are $50 a ticket, with the proceeds going to the Livonia Education Foundation Competitive Edge Program. And the LPS Foundation does have an email and a website. They are lpsfoundation@livoniapublicschools.org, or you are welcome to call our office, the superintendent's office, and Mrs. Wozniak can assist you with that as well.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. Surprise, surprise, I'd like to talk about robotics. Welcome to the new year. It's a new year for the schools, but it's not a new year for robotics. In the robotics program, the new year starts in January. So until January, the robotics team has scrimmages and off-season play with their existing robot playing the same game that was unveiled the previous January. Now, last year, the Livonia Warriors had a stellar year. They made it to nationals, and we found that nothing succeeds like success. Having such a stellar year brought in a bunch of young people eager to learn about robotics, and the size of the team grew exponentially. Fortunately, what you may not know is that during the frantic build season that starts in January, the Livonia Warriors, like many other teams, actually build two robots. There's a main robot and a backup robot. And the backup robot can be used for, obviously for backup, but for any other kind of necessary reason. So what happened is all these new rookies have been playing with the backup robot. Now picture this past weekend when there was a competition at Midland, and both robots and the seasoned players and the rookie players went to Midland. At the finals, The two teams, comprised of 3 robots, found Livonia facing Livonia.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
In the finals of the game, Livonia Warriors seasoned competitors against the rookie competitors. Congratulations to the rookie team who won the competition.
Good for them.
The future is bright.
The future is very bright indeed.
Wow, that's awesome.
Thank you. Mrs. Frank.
I did have an opportunity to tour the new robotics building. They have increased space, and they were touring us around, and it is phenomenal just how much they have, and the space assigned to them at Dickinson. They were very excited to be able to spread out and really get lots of room for all the robots. So it was really neat to see.
That's terrific. Mrs. Bonnefield.
I'm going to expand about the robotics. When we were at the community-wide corn roast, I was talking to a couple of the kids and Mrs. Carlini, and I know that we have the Warriors come in, and a couple of the kids will give us an update, but they have expanded that program incredibly, and so much so that they have actually expanded to a team for the overflow kids so that everyone that wants to participate in the robotics program gets a chance to. So they've got what do they call in the farm? They've got like farm teams, right? And stuff. And so it's in the support that we get from the community. So I know we talk about the Warriors and stuff, but I was just shocked and amazed at the number of people and the commitment that has gone into this, and that it's been allowed to keep expanding to provide these opportunities for the kids. It's just really amazing.
Absolutely. Any other board members make comments this evening? A lot of our fall sports are also continuing on. Their playoffs are beginning, I know, for soccer this week. For others, we're just on the cusp of playoffs. So if you'd like to go and catch a really fun evening that's close to home, I invite you to go ahead and attend some of our sporting events and support our athletes. We'd like to thank those members of our community that chose to attend our meeting this evening and join us in our audience. It's always special for the board members to get out into the schools and see exactly what's going on firsthand. It's also, we find it heartening when those members of our community want to attend our board meetings and see what's happening firsthand. I think that we all can serve one another better when we truly understand a little bit more of what's going on with each other's activities. I'd like to give one shout out and a thank you to two very special people who enable our board meetings to go on seemingly without a hitch. Fred, who takes care of all of our audio visuals, who is 2 floors above us right now, making sure that everything is being recorded properly. He catches all of our little technical difficulties quickly and usually gets us right back on the road again. Fred, thank you very much. Also, Mrs. Jill Wozniak, who is the secretary to the superintendent and the Board of Education. She is behind the scenes and puts together so many things for this Board of Education. In addition to being the secretary for the superintendent, she's responsible for all of our materials for our board meetings. And right now, this board specifically has been, the last few years, undertaken an enormous responsibility of reviewing all 600 pages of our policy. It is a huge undertaking for the board. It's equally huge for Mrs. Wozniak, who's got to go through ridiculous technical hoops because each one of these is treated independently and in addition to as one collective body of information. So every time the board makes a modification, it's a pile of work on Jill. Thank you so much for keeping up with all of us and for fielding phone calls and requests for information and everything else you do for this board. It's appreciated.
Thank you, Jill.
Any other comments from any other board members this evening? Seeing none, we have reached the end of our agenda. We are now adjourned. We'll see you next week. Good evening.